Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com. I'm here on Friday morning, July 24th, to bring you our Benny's Bats section. What we like to do here is kind of give you guys an idea of the pitchers that are on the mound today, what their weaknesses are, and which guys on the offense profile to do the best against them. The idea is that we want to try to help you guys cut down on your research time, make a short list of the guys in the best spots that you can look into a little bit further and try to build the best lineup you can to win some money. So let's get started. We got a lot of guys to talk about today. There's a lot of big tournaments around the industry. There's a double qualifier over on Fantasy Aces tonight for 2 seats to their live final. You got the Midsummer Classic going on at DraftKings, a $100 buy-in level. There's a medium one at the $20 buy-in level and a small one at the $3 buy-in level. So some big money going out there. Definitely make sure you get some lineups in there and take your shot at a big prize. First guy we're going to talk about today is Jeff Locke. Locke has struggled more with right-handed bats. They're hitting 277 against him with a whip of 1.45. He's not really allowing a lot of home runs, and there's not a ton of guys on that Washington Nationals team that he's going up against that really makes sense to use. I mean, basically the only guy who has good numbers against left-handed pitching is actually a left-hander, and Bryce Harper. He has a 453 WOBA with a 292 ISO number. The problem I have with Harper is he has 7 walks in his last 6 games. Because there's not a lot of protection in that lineup, people are just kind of pitching around him, and he's winding up with a lot of those games where he's 1 for 2 or 0 for 1 with 3 walks, and stuff like that is not going to help him pay off his salary. He's very expensive. No matter what site you're playing on, you're going to have to pay up for him, and if that's all he's going to give you is a couple walks, maybe a run scored or a stolen base, it's not going to be enough to really make up for the fact that you're paying top dollar for him. As a matter of fact, the second best WOBA on that Washington team belongs to Dan Uggla at 343, and Dan Uggla is not somebody that you want to roster often in fantasy. It's basically a roller coaster ride. He's either going to hit you a home run or he's going to go 0 for 4 with 2 or 3 strikeouts. So there's not a lot here that you're really looking at to go up against Locke. You can look at a guy like Chris Tillman. Tillman has allowed a 287 batting average to right-handed bats this year with 8 home runs and 45 innings pitched. He's going up against that Tampa Bay team that isn't really a great offense. There's a couple guys that are fringe options for me today. A guy like Longoria, a guy like Forsythe, maybe even a guy like Joey Butler. But none of those guys really profile well against right-handed pitching. The one guy who does hit right-handed pitching well is actually a left-hander, and that's John Jaso. He's got a 435 WOBA with a 206 ISO number and limited plate appearances. He missed a good portion of the season, but he's the best bat they have against right-handed pitching. But Tillman, like we said, is a little bit of a reverse splits guy. So you might want to look at some of those right-handed bats if you want to be contrarian. But I don't think that they have enough pop or enough upside to really help you, win a tournament if you stack a few of them up today. Next guy I want to talk about is Jose Quintana. Quintana has been dominant against left-handed batters. Left-handed batters are hitting under 200 against him so far this year, but he's been really knocked around by right-handers. Right-handers have a 302 batting average against him with a whip of 143 and 8 home runs in 93 innings. So he's not giving up a ton of home runs, but he is giving up a ton of hits, high batting average, letting a lot of right-handed bats get on base. The one guy you think of when you look at that Cleveland team and you think of right-handed bats is Ryan Rayburn. He's got a 397 WOBA, 240 ISO number, and he's basically been the guy who they plug in there in the cleanup spot when they go up against a left-hander, and he's been producing. He has a lot of extra base hits on the year, a lot of doubles, couple home runs. So he's definitely somebody you can look at. He's dirt cheap. He's minimum price over on FanDuel today at $2,200. It's not the greatest spot in the world for him, but at the same point in time, it's the splits matchup that you look for. Quintana has been struggling against righties, so it is a pretty good situation that you can put him in, especially at min price. He opens up a lot of options. If you want to pay up at pitching, if you want to get a few more of those Coors bats in your lineup, Rayburn is a way that you can do that. Next guy I want to talk about is Rick Porcello. Porcello goes up against Detroit. Now, he's been getting knocked around by guys of both-handedness. He has a 297 batting average allowed to left-handed bats with 11 home runs and 55 innings of work, and he has a 287 batting average against right-handed bats with 7 home runs and 50 innings of work. So you can basically look at anybody on this Detroit team to start against them. The two guys who stand out best on the numbers are JD Martinez with a 393 WOBA and a 295 ISO score, and Jonas Cespedes with a 372 WOBA and a 209 ISO score. So JD Martinez is definitely the guy who's got the most home run upside in this matchup. His price is a little bit expensive on most of the sites. It's come up. But again, if you look at the numbers that this guy has, he's got 20-something home runs on the year already, done a lot of damage against right-handed pitching. He does hit right-handed pitching well, and Porcello's been struggling against everybody. So I think that a lot of these Detroit bats are going to be in play today. It's one of the higher over-under games we have on the day. I think it's a run line of around 9. So it's definitely something I think you guys should look at. Next guy on the other side of that game is Justin Verlander. Verlander's allowed 8 home runs already in only 33 innings worth of work. He's got a 279 batting average allowed the lefties and a 299 batting average allowed the righties. So, again, he's a guy that this year almost everybody's in play. You can't really look at BVP for a situation like this because Verlander's not the same pitcher this year as he was a couple years ago, which is why I think BVP is a stat that doesn't always translate well. What you want to look at now is the fact that he's basically been getting knocked around by guys of both-handedness and guys that aren't the greatest hitters in the league either. So he's definitely somebody that you can look to target against today. The guys that pop out against left-handed pitching, you got a guy like Alejandro De Aza, who's been buried in the 6 or 7 hole in that order, despite the fact he has a 403 WOBA and a 230 ISO number. So he's one of the best hitters that we have right now currently against right-handed pitching. But for some reason, he's getting buried deep down in that order with a guy like Brock Holt, who's also not a horrible option, hitting in the 2 hole. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you see Diaz moved up in the order, he's an automatic play for me. If he's down in the 6 or 7 hole, I still like him because his numbers are still very good against right-handed pitching. The guy who's been killing right-handed pitching for the Red Sox for years has been David Ortiz, 377 WOBA, 247 ISO score. So he's a guy that not only can hit for average, but he can also hit for power. Against the struggling Verlander, I think he might be in a pretty good spot today as well for some upside. His price is pretty cheap. I think he's only like $3,300 on FanDuel today. So based, compared to some of the other first base options that you really have to pay up for, he could be a guy that gives you the same kind of pop, the same kind of upside, and does so at a much lower price. Next guy I want to talk about is the Dodgers going up against Jonathan Nice. Nice has allowed a 269 batting average to right-handed bats with 10 homers and 87 innings pitched. Now, he is pitching at home in Citi Field, which is one of the best parks in the majors for pitchers. And he is a left-hander, which is something that the Dodgers don't do as well against. There's a different set of guys that you want to look at against a left-hander than you do against a right-hander on the Dodgers. Despite the fact that he usually kills right-handed pitching, I think Justin Turner is somebody who can be in play today. He was 3 for 5 last year against Nice with a home run and a double. So he's already been able to hit him hard. He's shown some power. And again, that's a small sample size, 3 for 5, but we know that Nice does struggle with right-handed bats, and we know that Turner is going to be towards the top of that order and has basically been mashing the ball this year. You can use a guy like Enrique Hernandez if he gets in there. I like that a lot better when he was leading off. Lately, when they've been putting him in, he's been batting towards the bottom of the order. But he has a 456 WOBA and a 317 ISO score, which are absolutely insane numbers for a guy who is second base and outfield eligible on a lot of sites, depending where you're playing. If you can get him at second base, I think he's a great option over there. He's pretty cheap all over the place. If you need a salary-saving outfielder, I think he fits in as well. But again, wait till the lineup comes out to see where he's hitting. I like him less if he's hitting in the 7th spot, obviously, than I do if he's leading off. But again, he's another guy like Diaz that I still think is in play because the numbers are that good. You can always look at a guy like Scott Van Slyke when you go up against when he goes up against a left-handed pitcher. Last year, he had 8 home runs and 100 at-bats against lefties. This year, he's got a WOBA of 415 with an ISO score of 216. So he's somebody that could be in play as well. He tends to bat in about the 5 spot whenever they go up against a left-hander. So if you have him in an RBI position like that, his price is pretty cheap in most spots throughout the industry. He's definitely somebody else that you can look at from this game. And the last guy is Yasiel Puig, 377 WOBA, 222 ISO score. He's a right-handed bat that likes hitting against lefties, so he's another guy that I think you can look at on that Dodgers team. Moving on from there, you got a guy like Jeremy Guthrie. Guthrie's going up against Houston today. Now, Guthrie has been one of the worst pitchers in the league over the last couple of years against left-handed bats. So the one guy who really stands out to me is Preston Tucker. 387 WOBA, 268 ISO score. Had the 2 home runs about 2 days ago against a right-handed pitcher. usually tends to get moved up in the order and bat in the 2 hole in between Altuve and Correa when they face a lefty. So I definitely think that Tucker is somebody you want to look at today. The other 2 left-handed bats on Houston that might be in play, you can look at a guy like Valbuena. My problem with Valbuena today is he's basically very home run dependent, and Kauffman Stadium's not the best place to to look for home runs against. So if you got a guy in a stadium where it's tough to hit home runs and the only thing that he brings to the table is his home run upside, it's probably more of a high risk, high reward play that would be something you might want to use in a tournament. But again, I don't think it's a great spot for him today. Same goes for the catcher, Jason Castro, more of a home run hitter kind of guy, has a little bit of pop, has some upside, cheap price. But again, it's not somebody who I think is in a great spot today, but he does have a good splits matchup, being a lefty going up against a righty who struggles with left-handed bats. Next guy we're going to talk about is Michael Pineda. Now, Michael Pineda is a guy who I hear a lot of people talking about as a potential start tonight. But just look at his numbers. Against left-handed bats, he's given up a 268 batting average. Against right-handed bats, he's actually given up a 280 average so far this year. One guy who I really like is Miguel Sano. He's got a 522 WOBA with a 310 ISO number. Now, he is coming back from an injury. He recently just hurt his ankle. So make sure that he's in the lineup. If he's DHing, which is what I hope he is, he has been able to, swing the bat and play in the last couple games. He hasn't been back at third base taking ground balls over there yet. But again, if he's able to hit the ball, we're not getting him for his fielding. We're looking at him for his bat. And he's a guy who has hit right-handed pitching well. And Pineda has been, struggling against right-handers lately. So I think that you can look at some of those right-handed bats. Another guy that I really like is Uribe Dozier. He's got a 355 WOBA with a 253 ISO number, so he's got some power. He can take a guy like Pineda yard. He's going to be low owned. He's going to fly under the radar, especially in a righty-righty matchup, not in a good hitter's ballpark. But, I definitely think that there's some upside to looking at a guy like Dozier too. I think he's kind of cheap on FanDuel. He's only like 3,900, which makes him cheaper than a guy like, a Rognit Odor. So he might be in play over there. Definitely somebody you can use as a swerve for your tournaments. It gives you a lot of upside with that home run power that he does have. Next guy we're going to talk about on the other side of that game is Phil Hughes. Phil Hughes has allowed 23 home runs in 123 innings of work already. Right-handed bats are hitting 296 against them, and left-handers are hitting 274. So one of the guys who I think is in a great spot today and is somebody that you can use, his prices come up, but not too much, and I think he'll be low-owned with a big chance for a home run, is Mark Teixeira from the Yankees. Tex has a 404 WOBA with a 343 ISO number. So it's one of the bigger power numbers you're going to see on the day-to-day, and I think he makes a lot of sense to roll out there against a guy like Hughes. A-Rod is also 382 WOBA, 238 ISO, so he might be in play, especially with the way Hughes struggles with right-handers and, gives up the home run ball. And the last guy is somebody like Brett Gardner, who's got a 375 WOBA this year. Doesn't have a huge ISO number at 174, but that is a pretty big ISO number for a leadoff hitter, especially somebody who you consider a speed guy more than a guy that provides some power. Next guy we can talk about is Tim Cooney going up against Atlanta. Right-handed bats have done better against him. He had a high home run rate against right-handed bats in the minors, so that's really the way you want to look. The one guy who really stands out to me is Jose Uribe. Since coming over to the Braves, he has a 443 WOBA and a 361 ISO number against left-handed pitching. It's not the greatest ballpark to hit in. He's probably going to be in the middle of the order, though. Could have a good chance to drive a couple balls, maybe pick up an RBI double, maybe even get a home run out of it today. He's the one bat that I really want to target in this game on Atlanta. You can also look at guys like Chris Johnson and Johnny Gomes, but I don't have anywhere near as much faith in those guys as I do in a guy like Uribe. So he would be the one bat that I would really want to look at. Cameron Maybin's another guy you can kind of add to that list as well. He's also somebody who might be in play. Moving on to the other side of that game, you got Manny Banuelos on the mound. Now, he's on an innings limit. He pitched 5.2, 5.1, and 4.2 innings in the 3 starts that he's had so far this year. He just came back off of Tommy John surgery, and the talk was they were trying to take it slow with him. They don't know if he has a lot of innings left for the rest of the year. They wanted to try to keep him around 100, which is a number that he's getting pretty close to between what he's done in the big leagues and the innings that he pitched in the minors. So I don't see him going more than maybe 4 or 5 innings. St. Louis has really struggled with left-handed bats, but if you're going to look at the righties, just realize that by like the 6th or 7th inning, you're probably going to be into the bullpen. And you're probably going to get that last at bat or two from each one of these guys against one of the right-handed relievers that Atlanta decides to roll out there. Some of the guys who do profile pretty well against lefties like Benuelos, though, are Randall Grichuk. Hit another homer the other day, has a 347 WOBA, 217 ISO score, usually bats down in the 6 or 7 spot in the order. This guy has a lot of power, so he's a tournament option because he has some upside. But again, not the greatest hitter's park, not really somebody I'm looking to target. You can look at a guy like Matt Holliday, although I have a feeling he might actually sit today. But he's got a 397 WOBA, 167 ISO number, so he's another guy that could be in play. And the last guy is shortstop Johnny Peralta. Peralta's WOBA is a little bit low at 348, but he has a really high ISO number for a shortstop at 263, meaning he's one of the better shortstop options to give you that home run power on the day, and definitely could be somebody that you look at. His price is not too crazy on most of the sites, so he does fit into your lineups pretty nicely. And I think he's got a pretty nice matchup today with Benuelos, at least for the first 2 at-bats he has. All right, now to get to the fun stuff. We got Eddie Butler pitching against Cincinnati in Colorado. Butler has allowed lefties to hit 333, 3 home runs in 27 innings. Righties have hit 305, 4 home runs in 27 innings. So basically anybody you want to put in on that Cincinnati team is somebody that, makes decent sense to put into your rosters. Now, they are getting the Coors premium. Every guy on that team has seen his price jump a little bit, but there's a couple of them that are in good spots that I wanted to point out. You got a guy like Joey Votto at a 410 WOBA and a 245 ISO number. So that's a huge number, huge power number, great average with the, with the high WOBA. So he's somebody who's definitely in play. If he's not the most expensive first baseman on the day on whatever site you're playing, if he's far enough away from some of the top options, he makes a lot of sense to be one of the better values, especially in a game of Coors that has a run line of 11, and it'll probably going to be, it's a good bet that might even go over. Usually when we see those double-digit run lines, there's a good chance that the game ends 7-6, 6-5, 8-4, something like that. And you see a ton of runs on the day. With Cincinnati being favored, they're the ones that should be scoring these runs. And with Eddie Butler being a kind of a gas can, they're definitely in a good spot to put up a big number today. You can use a guy like Todd Frazier, 371 WOBA, 255 ISO, so he has the home run upside and hits for average. A guy like Ivan DeJesus, the second baseman, he has a 371 WOBA against right-handed pitching. He's actually been hitting pretty well, and they've been putting him in the 2-hole. So if you got guys that you like a Frazier or like a Votto today who are hitting behind them, you got to like the guy who's setting the table and getting up in front of them. With those guys behind him, there's a good chance they can drive him in. There's a good chance that, he can steal a base for you. He can score a couple runs. There's a lot that he can do at a very small price today, and he could be one of those salary savers that you use to fit guys in. His price is up from where it has been because he does have the Coors premium. But still, it's not like a guy like a Votto who's up now, top 3 first baseman option on the day. He's still in the mid range. There's still a lot of guys that are more expensive than him, and he's still a salary saving option for you. Also, you can look at shortstop Eugenio Suarez, who they picked up from Detroit. He's got a 360 WOBA, 155 ISO number so far against right-handed pitching. And yesterday, I actually saw him hitting. I think he was hitting in the 5-hole yesterday. So if he's going to be in a power spot in the 5-hole in the order, you got to put him in your lineup, or at the very least, you got to look at him and consider him as somebody that that you might want to use. On the other side of that game, you have Anthony DeSclafani. Now, in his last 3 starts, he's been horrible. 16 innings pitched, 4 home runs allowed, 14 runs, 24 hits. Left-handed bats are hitting 252 against him with a 146 whip and 7 home runs in 57 innings. So that's really the way you kind of want to attack him. That means guys like Blackman and Cargo are in play. Blackman's 387 WOBA, 200 ISO number, stealing bases left and right. Going to be on top of that order, so he's someone you can look at. Cargo has actually upped his numbers. He had a slow start to the year, but his WOBA is now up to 379. His ISO score is up to 254 against right-handers, and he's at home at Coors Field, so he's another guy that has some big upside and not a huge price yet. You can look at a guy like Hundley at catcher, 378 WOBA. He's somebody that could be in play. Paulson as a first base or outfield option, depending on what site you're on, 355 WOBA, 188 ISO score. And the one right-handed bat who's been killing right-handed pitching this year has been Nolan Arenado, 390 WOBA, 329 ISO score. So one of the higher ISO scores you see in a high-scoring game, and he's one of the better guys for a home run opportunity today. So I definitely think that he's somebody that's worth paying up for in spots. Again, because they're in course, he's one of the most expensive options at third base. He's either first or second on almost every site. Basically, both of the third basemen from this game, him and Frazier, have seen their prices jacked up. And they're two of the most expensive options on the day, but they're also two of the best options. Let's see. We got a guy like Pat Corbin pitching for Arizona against Milwaukee. You got to go back to like 2013 to really take a look at his stats and how he's pitched. He didn't pitch at all last year, and this is only like his second or third start of 2015. But right-handed bats have been the way to get at him. The one right-handed bat whose numbers really stand out is Ryan Braun. He's got a 387 WOBA, 221 ISO score, had a home run yesterday. He's a guy that I think you can use whenever he goes up against left-handed pitching. He's always an option, and they're in a good hitter's ballpark. There's really only two games in hitter's ballparks today. There's a game in Arizona, a game in Colorado. The rest of the games are in places like St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, New York Mets, San Diego. Some of the worst parks for hitters that we have in the league. So when you see some of these guys in that Arizona stadium or in that Colorado stadium, you want to have some exposure to them, because those are the guys that are most likely to be in good spots and rack up a couple hits and walks and runs scored and all that good stuff today. Let's see, where else? We got Jimmy Nelson on the other side of that game going up against Arizona. Left-handed bats are hitting 304 against him with 7 home runs and 44 innings pitched. Now, here's the problem that you have. The big left-handed bat that you really want to use on Arizona is David Peralta. Peralta took a fastball off the knuckles the other day, so he didn't even play yesterday. You saw a guy like Cliff Pennington, who's a switch hitter, I think, batting in the 2-hole. So if Pennington is in the 2-hole again, he's like min-priced on FanDuel, pretty cheap over on DraftKings too. He could be one of those salary-saving guys that you want, but he doesn't have a ton of upside. The guys that do profile well against right-handed pitching are a guy like Goldie. Goldie's got a 430 WOBA, 247 ISO number. So again, he's always expensive, but he's been producing all year. Home runs, stolen bases. If you pitch to him, he can hit you hard. If you walk him, he's going to steal second and score when somebody else gets a hit behind him. A guy like Yasmani Tomas has been putting the ball in play and hitting it lately. So if you put Goldie on, it's going to be tough for you to keep him from scoring. The other guy you can look at is AJ Pollock. Pollock had a bunch of doubles yesterday. He's got a 348 WOBA with a 150 ISO score. So it's not huge upside. If he's cheap, I think he's a decent option. If you have to pay up for him, there are so many other outfielders that I think I'd rather pay up for over Pollock. But again, he's another guy I just wanted to mention could be in play. Next game I want to talk about is Texas and the Angels. You got Kobe Lewis, who's really struggled with left-handed bats. 268 batting average so far this year, but there aren't really any lefties that I want to target against him on this Texas team. There are 2 right-handed bats that have been killing right-handed pitching. You got Trout at a 413 WOBA with a 292 ISO, and you got Pujols at a 393 WOBA with a 306 ISO. So both of those guys have the home run power to go yard today. 2 of the better players in the last 10 years in the sport, and I think that both of them are in play. They're both expensive, though, so you are going to have to pay up. But where you're using one, I think it makes a lot of sense to stack the 2 of them together, because I do think that there's going to be some runs scored in that Texas Angels game, and I think the Angels are going to get a couple of those runs. Let's see. We got a guy on the other side of that game, and Nick Tropiano. A small sample size, but left-handed bats have been the way to attack him. So that means you got a guy like Prince Fielder in play, 416 WOBA, 168 ISO. A guy like Mitch Moreland makes a good tournament option, 400 WOBA, 294 isolated power number. Has been hitting a lot of home runs lately, is a guy that can drive the ball. Seems like he's in a decent spot here against Nick Tropiano. And now that they're back to American League play, he'll be able to get back in the lineup as the DH. They won't have to choose between using him or Fielder at first base. You could also look at some of the other guys, some of the cheaper options. You got a guy like Sinshu Chu. He's got a 367 WOBA with a 218 ISO number. He flies under the radar, but he's been hitting the ball much better. He had a horrid start to the season, so he's come on strong lately to get his numbers up to respectability. And the last guy is Rougned Odor. Since they moved this guy up, he's done nothing but hit, especially against right-handed pitching. Has a 371 WOBA, 209 ISO number. Usually bats in the 2-hole in front of the big bats like Fielder and Moreland. And again, he's been producing lately, putting up decent fantasy scores no matter what site you play on. So I think he's another guy that you can take a look at, especially at a hard-to-fill second base position today. You got Andrew Kastner. Kastner's the guy who struggled with left-handed bats. if a guy like Derek Dietrich's in the lineup, he could be another one of those cheap second base options. He's got a 393 WOBA against right-handed pitching, an ISO score over 200. You could also look at Justin Bour. Justin Bour is that guy that pops out all the time against right-handed pitching, 368 WOBA, 240 ISO number, but he hasn't really produced much lately. So a lot of people are starting to back away from him. He's in a little bit of a slump. But again, he's a feast or famine kind of guy. He'll go 3 or 4 games without a hit or with only like a walk and maybe 1 hit or something like that. And then all of a sudden he'll explode for a 2 or 3 run home run. And you'll be kicking yourself for not having that cheap first base option that goes yard. So I'm not calling a home run from him today, but I am saying that he's a guy that has that kind of power, that kind of profile, and is going up against a pitcher who's been struggling with left-handed bats. So just keep that in mind when you're filling out your rosters if you have to spend down at first base. Bour is probably the best option that you can do that with. Let's see. We got Drew Hutchinson. Hutchinson has allowed a 330 batting average this year to right-handed bats. He has basically really struggled away from home too, and he's pitching away from home today. The thing is, though, he pitches in Seattle. Seattle's a pretty good pitcher's park, so I don't give him a huge downgrade even though he's on the road, although his road numbers have been pretty bad this year. The one guy who really stands out to me is Nelson Cruz. Cruz hit another couple homers the other day, 368 WOBA, 217 ISO number, so he's got power. He can hit for average. You might want to look at the lefties against Hutchinson too, which means that you got guys like Robinson Cano and Kyle Seager who will be in play. Again, I still need to see more out of these guys because even though they're hitting a little bit better, they were hitting so bad that, basically getting any hits is considered hitting a little bit better than they were earlier in the year. I still don't have a ton of faith, but the price of both of these guys is pretty cheap. It is a tough ballpark to hit in, but I do think that both of them could have a little bit of upside today with the cheap prices. Let's see. The last game we can talk about is San Francisco against Oakland. You got Jake Peavy going up. Peavy has really struggled with left-handed bats that have some power. So there's 2 guys that I really want to look at on Oakland. You got Josh Reddick at a 386 WOBA with a 207 ISO number. He's somebody who's a decent option. He's starting to get very cheap all over the place. I think on FanDuel he's down to like 2,800. So on a day where there's some big pitching you might want to pay for or some big bats and cores you might want in your lineup, he's definitely somebody that can help you save some salary and make that work. The guy I like more, though, is Stephen Vogt. Stephen Vogt is down to 2,700 on FanDuel, where I think he's almost an automatic start for me over there. 395 WOBA, 242 ISO score. The guy hits right-handed pitching incredibly well, has over the course of his entire career. And again, against a guy who struggles with left-handed power, well, that's pretty much what Vogt is. And if you can get left-handed power out of your catching option at a pretty cheap price, I definitely think that's somebody that's worth inclusion in both cash and your GPP rosters today, even though it's not the greatest ballpark to hit in. But as we said, most of these ballparks are not the greatest ballpark to hit in today. Last guy up is Jesse Chavez. Chavez has been struggling with the left-handed bats, allowed them to hit 279 with 128 whip, 7 home runs in 55 innings of work. So a guy like Brandon Belt is probably the best way to attack that. 389 WOBA, 233 ISO number for him. You can also look at a guy like Joe Panic if he's batting in the 2-hole. He's a lefty as well with a 370 WOBA, so he should be in a decent spot here today. And another guy, if you need a catcher option, I mean, Buster Posey has the highest WOBA on the entire team, even though he's a righty-on-righty matchup. He's got a 391 WOBA with a 183 ISO score. So that basically rounds out all the guys that we wanted to point out for you today. There are a lot of options that you can choose from. There are a lot of different ways to go about it. As we said, you probably want to have some exposure to that Colorado and Arizona game. Those are the 2 games that are in hitters' parks that, they're basically expecting the most, the most upside out of. So if you don't have any exposure to those games, you're probably going to be behind the 8 ball. I don't think that you can completely fade them. You might want to try taking a few less guys from there and sprinkling in some guys from otherwhere if you're trying to differentiate yourself. But again, in an 11-run total game, when a lot of the other games are taking place in pitchers' parks and have run lines of 7.5 or less, I don't think you cannot have any exposure to Cincinnati and Colorado today and still find yourself having a top roster. So thank you guys for coming here and joining us at RotoCurve. This has been another section of Benny's Bats. You can follow me over on Twitter at BennyR11. Make sure you follow the RotoCurve site at RotoCurve and go over and sign up at rotocurve.com for an account. Every post, every action that you do will help you earn some curve points. You can trade those curve points in for RotoCurve shirts, hats. You can trade it in for in for nights. So come over, join the community, be a part of it. And, we're more than happy to help you out, more than happy to answer all your questions. So thank you guys for joining us again today at RotoCurve. And as always, stay classy, DFS.